Okay, good deal. So, yeah.
Um, I don't have a lot of questions, but I'm gonna ask you a couple. Thank you, Dr. Green, for always bringing in various amazing people from the Raleigh Review for us to come talk to. So, Bryce, I wanted to ask you. I see Dr. Green mentioned that you are currently teaching out of New Mexico. How do you like that?
It's a combination of jobs actually. I adjunct at a community college in Santa Fe, which is about an hour from Albuquerque, which is where I live right now. Um, and so I'm actually not teaching this semester, but I occasionally teach night classes. I was adjuncting full time for about for a full school year, and then I uh, transitioned to a full time job for a publisher, University of New Mexico Press, which is a publisher out of UNM, which is here in Albuquerque. And so they do scholarly books, and they also do poetry and fiction and nonfiction. So anyway, to be honest, I needed health insurance and full time guaranteed employment. So I got that job, and I still teach on the side. But to be honest, though, I do love teaching. And I've taught composition and reading at the community college, and I found it really rewarding. I've actually never taught creative writing, which is what I know a lot of people in my field aspire to do, but I got a lot of enjoyment out of teaching essay writing and teaching like remedial writing to college students, especially out here at a community college where a lot of our student populations are from rural communities, and it's not super urban out here. So it was, I would teach everything from high achieving AP students who are still in high school to, 40 somethings who were working full time with a family and trying to get a degree so they could, improve their prospects for their families. So so I still do that every so often. I'll teach a night class for a semester, but mostly I'm working for the publisher right now. But still love teaching whenever I can do it.
I don't know if G has a question, but I wanted to follow up and ask, what? So I see you said you work for the University of New Mexico Press. I've heard of these. I've never really done research about what a press is. I'm assuming, like what you said, they kind of work in the literary world. But what exactly is your role at the press? Do you review work that comes into the press, and do you select candidates, or how does exactly the University of New Mexico Press work, and what's your role there?
Yeah, I can talk about publishing at length too. So I actually, whenever I was getting my MFA at NC State, I did an internship for a semester at UNC Press. And UNC's, so there's, in the publishing world, there's kind of like three main houses. There's the big five publishers, which is actually, I think, going to be the big four soon. They all kind of keep swallowing each other and becoming smaller conglomerate or bigger conglomerates. But so the big publishers, Penguin Random House and HarperCollins and Macmillan. So those are like the giant ones where like, you see like the books that get made into movies, and Stephen King and people like that publishing those. And then there's the indie presses, which publish a lot of the poetry and fiction, literary fiction that we read and talk about and see it in our creative writing programs. So those are the smaller ones, usually run by, anywhere from one person to, 20 people, and publish a lot less books. And, their writers probably don't get giant advances, stuff like that. So there's the big houses, the indies. And then where I work, which is a university press. And university presses are subsidized by the universities, so which means that they actually don't have to turn a profit, which is the case for us. We operate at a deficit every year, but we're subsidized by the university because as a university press, you have important missions that are like in many ways more valuable than turning a profit. So we publish, all university presses will publish scholarship of some kind, almost all of them will. So at UNM Press, we're kind of known for Latin American studies and Southwestern and Indigenous studies. And so UNC Press would have their own, Duke University Press would have their own kind of identities. Wake Forest also has a university press. And I know UNC and Duke don't publish any poetry. They don't publish maybe for fiction. They publish maybe occasionally like an anthology or something. But for us, like we're one of the rare university presses that publishes also in all of those literary spaces too. I work in marketing. That's before I went to grad school. I was a freelance marketing writer. So that was kind of my background professionally. And it's small presses like this. We have two editors and a director who also acquires books. So those three people are the contact points. We have one person. If you are a scholar, you propose books to this one person. If you write literary books, you propose your works to this other editor. And then our director kind of has the is somebody who just kind of like has a lot of connections, knows a lot of people, knows agents, and he just kind of like acquires books whenever he knows of something. He kind of goes out and gets them. But as a marketing person here at the press, I do a lot of setting up author events. So I'm always communicating with authors and their agents and with bookstores, and I'm getting them readings, I'm getting them speaking engagements. I'm setting up our conference presences. So, during non-COVID times, we were going to like 18 conferences a year, setting up a booth and, hanging out at the booth, talking to authors, talking to people who want to buy books, that kind of thing. And, I do all the social media marketing kind of stuff that you would also imagine goes into doing books, sending out emails, stuff like that. But yeah, it's more of a marketing job than a literary job, what I do. It's, that's kind of the background I had. So it's what I was able to get in a publishing capacity. So yeah, but it's one way for sure to stay within the literary world if that's what your love is and that's what you want to do. Publishing is one way to go. And there's a lot of different stuff you can do with it. And if that's something that you're interested, I would definitely recommend looking into internship programs at UNC and Duke. And I know Algonquin, which is a literary publisher, and they run out of, I think they're in Chapel Hill, somewhere around Chapel Hill. Algonquin also, they do some editorial internships too. But yeah, there's opportunities out there to kind of dabble in publishing too.
As a literary writer, what pros and cons would you give aspiring young writers?
Sorry, could you repeat the question, Jay?
As a literary writer, can you give some pros and cons to future writers?
Sure. It's like the cons of this kind of world that we're in is there's a sense that it's really competitive in a lot of ways, and there's a sense that there's more people than there are paid positions, and it gets easy. The more you kind of stay in the literary world, the more I see a lot of people get caught up in this sort of competitiveness of it, and that's something that I've always kind of abhorred and detested. I'm not a competitive person, and I'm a very communal person. I don't like seeing people that I think I'm in some form of competition with. I like to think that we're all able to kind of do these things, and there's space for all of us. But but in a professional capacity and in terms of making money, like I'm sure y'all have gotten it. You tell somebody you are studying English, going into studying writing, and they say, "Oh, what are you going to do?" And you probably also got, "Oh, are you going to teach?" And there's not. It can seem like there's not a lot of opportunities in the literary world, and in a lot of ways that's true. There's not a ton of editor positions. If you want to go out and acquire books, those are competitive technically because there's not a ton of those positions. But That's not to say that they're unattainable. People get them all the time. And, like the person who is the literary editor for my publisher here at UNM, she was an intern while she was getting her MFA, and then she was a student worker for a couple semesters, and then she was working as a copy editor. Again, that's another, I guess I'll get to that in a second too, is another job you can get in the literary world is also in just copy editing. And so, she was doing that. So she was just, checking manuscripts for spelling and format and grammar. And then the editor left, and suddenly there was a position open, and they decided to hire internally since she was there and she had her MFA, and she had no experience as an editor. So she got actually really lucky, and has now been our editor for 9 years. But at any rate, it's not, this isn't one of those kind of career fields where, like nursing or education, where you study the thing and then you graduate, and then those jobs there's like that direct track straight to those jobs. A lot of us really have to find our own ways. And I think if you got 10, 20 writers together and you ask them all how they got to their jobs and their professions, you get 10, 20 different stories. I know Rob's is a lot different from mine. Landon's is different from mine, and everybody at Raleigh reviews. So there's a lot of perseverance. There's a lot of kind of creativity, and you have to have, and it helps to be kind of a jack of all trades, I think, in some ways. But anyway, it's so that can be a drawback if you're somebody who really wants stability and you're somebody who really wants a kind of clear set career path that you can depend on. It's not necessarily going to be that way. But on the plus side, if this is what you're doing, this is what you have to do. If you're studying writing and literature, you're not doing it because you wanted clear and easy job prospects. You're doing it because it's just what you love, and there's something that you just know that's what resonates with you and who you are and what your interests are, what your talents are. So in that way, it can be really gratifying to work in that field. I know it's been like it's been great for me to work in a capacity that uses my skills as a writer and as a reader. And that's been really rewarding. And even outside of the professional world, studying creative writing as an undergrad, studying it as an MFA student, it's just been, I had great experiences with other writers. The writing community for me has been awesome. I still have friends that I talk to from my MFA program. I graduated with my BA in 2011. I still have friends from my creative writing program back then that I talk to. But it's you get into this world out of passion, and getting to really kind of share that with other people who also share that passion is like always gratifying, always rewarding. So yeah, it's I don't want to make it sound like I'm trying to like tell you don't go into this field, but it's like I said, you do this because you really have a passion for it, and it's you find a way to make it work. And some people are really successful at it, and some people take a little bit longer to get successful at it. So it just takes perseverance.
Wow. Yeah, definitely. I understand that. Sometimes I worry about, where my English degree is going to lead me to. But, I want to use it for law eventually. And I want to transition later into, possibly pursuing a higher degree of English one day. But I always wonder, what else can this be used for? But I wanted to ask, how did you come to collaborate with the Raleigh Review?
Actually, before I answer that, I'll address a couple of those things too, because I'm also considering a law degree at the moment as well, because I've kind of had a growing sense that even though I don't want to also sound like I'm jumping ship from the literary world, but there's a long history of writers who study law and who go into legal professions, and a lot of lawyers who are writers. But creative writing is sort of the opposite of legal writing. Is something I've learned. Legal writing is very, very, very denotative, very to the book, and not open to interpretation whatsoever. And but it is the skill set of being able to think critically, to read something, synthesize information from it, create an argument, create a kind of narrative from what's not said, that kind of thing. Those skill sets are translatable for sure. And I think studying reading and writing is definitely something that could prepare you for a law degree. And I think, and I've gotten the sense too that law schools value people who have a diverse range of experience, that didn't just go through only studying laws in undergraduate, went straight through to a law school. I think having a range of experiences outside of laws is good for that. But yeah, it's anyway, and I think that this degree, studying English and writing, prepares you for a lot of different fields. I mean, I worked in marketing, and I mean, creative writing was really important for that. And so, and I think that skill set of like anything, like in this day and age where everything is digital, having the ability to write is going to be key for almost any professional field. And selling yourself in that way, even if you're not going into something that's writing related, if you're a good writer, you can sell yourself. You can write a good resume, or cover letter, that kind of thing. Anyway, so but I'll go on to your other question about Raleigh Review. So whenever I was applying for grad schools, after my undergrad, I took a year off. I got rejected by 17 MFA programs the next time I applied. Out of all of them, one of them gave me a wait list. Two of them gave me wait lists. No, one of them gave me a wait list. The other one was like not quite a wait list. That was weird. Anyway, so then I took 2 years off, and I just studied my ass off, and I read every book of poetry I owned. I read craft books, and I wrote every single night. And then I applied again 2 years later, and out of the 12 programs I applied to, I got into 8 of them. And NC State was one of them. And I can talk about that story later if we ever get to it. But it's while I was waiting to, after I had agreed to go to NC State, I knew that I wanted to work on a literary magazine. As an undergraduate at the University of Central Florida, we had 2 lit mags. We had an undergraduate literary journal. It's called Cypress Dome, which was it was run by students, and it only published students from the school. And then, so I interned with that for a year. And we also had the Florida Review, which is a national literary magazine. And I, as a sophomore in my first creative writing class, I went to my creative writing professor and I said, what can I do outside of the classroom that's related to this? I'm really interested in literary publishing. And she said, well, we have the Florida Review. Why don't you ask them? So I went down, and I was a sophomore, and I asked them if I could get an internship, and they're like, we usually don't let people who are not juniors or seniors who haven't done all their coursework yet, haven't started their coursework yet, do this. But since you asked, I guess sure, you can do it. So I ended up interning for that lit mag for 3 years. I did another year after I graduated too, reading manuscripts and copy editing, learning the industry. And back then we were getting snail mail submissions mostly. So we would get this, we had this box of like new submissions, and we'd come into the office and we'd pull out 10 of them, and we would read, and then we'd stuff them back in the envelope, and we'd flip the envelope over and we'd jot our notes on that. So on the back of it, you would have like the handwritten, indecipherable scrawl of 3 different undergraduate, like highly caffeinated undergraduates, like who didn't know what the fuck they were talking about, because they were like, we're all new to this. And so we're like writing our notes, reading each other's notes, and then we'd stick that in another box, and then some other editor would pick up the box, look at them, and then like probably just throw them out. I don't know. But it was really fun, and it was a great experience. I think I led to maybe 1 publication in my 3 years there, and many interns did actually, lead some publications, but at any rate, it was a great experience, and so I knew I wanted to do more of that. And I found the Raleigh Review while I was still living in New Mexico, getting ready to come out here. And so I emailed Rob, and there was he hooked me up with Sierra, who was the poetry editor at the time. And she interviewed me. I remember doing a phone interview with her while I was driving the 2 hours through the middle of the desert between my small town and Albuquerque to, I don't know, do whatever, go to Trader Joe's. And and like a windstorm, I could barely hear. Anyway, I ended up getting the readership position. So I moved out here. And then I was a reader for a year. And then Sierra left, and she, we mostly kind of promote internally, if you want to call it a promotion, but we try to kind of keep it in-house as much as we can. And, and so she asked me if I wanted to try out for the editor position, and, I did. So, and then I became I kind of followed her, and I was the poetry editor for 4 years, I think. And, then I did the same thing she did, actually. I met somebody at a writing conference in Santa Fe who went to UNC Wilmington, and strangely enough, and she was interested in joining Raleigh Review, so she came on as a reader, and like 2 years later, a year later maybe, whenever I moved on to co-editor, I wanted to find a replacement, and she ended up being the one who replaced me. So so it's been it's been 6-7 years now that I've been part of Raleigh Review, and I started as nobody, came up as a reader, then an editor, and then I'm co-editor. So yeah, it's been a long journey.
As a collegiate student, right? And with your experience and exposure, other than an internship, how would you suggest that we actually get our writings out there?
So I started publishing whenever I was an undergrad, and that was a result of me being an intern in a lot of ways, because I realized whenever I got to graduate school that a lot of my peers still had a kind of mystical idea of publishing, and they had never been published, and they didn't really know that much about it. And so there was a lot of education that happened at that point. And a lot of us were, later 20s or 30s or whatever. And, some of them had never published, some of them had won contests, kind of ran the gamut. But and I realized that it's due to education in a lot of ways, because there are so many literary magazines in this country, in the world, really. And I mean, print magazines, there's hundreds, online magazines, probably thousands. And, some of them may have an acceptance rate. Some of the smaller, lesser known ones may accept 30-40% of the stuff that gets sent in. A lot of the bigger ones accept less than 2% of what gets sent to them. I think at Raleigh Review, we publish under 3% of our submissions, something along those lines, under 5%. And so anyway, it's the getting into the publishing world as a writer. I mean, it's the first step is you got to be doing the work as the writer. So I, as an undergraduate, I was writing an honors thesis. I don't know if St. Aug's has anything along those lines, but that's really what got me writing. I was writing poetry my whole time as an undergraduate, but it was like only for workshops, and a lot of it wasn't that great. But then I did an honors thesis, and I had to write a 20-something page thesis of a collection of poems, and I had to read a book list that I went over with my advisor. So I had 20 books that I had to read over the course of 2 semesters, give notes on, and write my 20 poems over 2 semesters, put it together with a proposal. So my thesis proposal was like really useful, because it got me to like thinking on like a big level about what I was writing. Anyway, so all that's to say that I published a couple of times as an undergrad, publishing poems from that. And the only reason I had those poems was because I had this reason to really spend a lot of time and effort doing it. You know, I was reading a lot and I was writing a lot, and that's baseline. Before you even send anything to a magazine, you should be reading and writing a lot, and not just writing a lot, but also taking what you write, sharing it with people who you trust and getting comments from them on how it could be improved or what's good about it, and taking those notes and ignoring some of those notes. You kind of get an instinct for it at some point, what to listen to and what to ignore. And and kind of a way that I got my writing better was I took the work that I thought was my best and was really good, I would come back to a year later and realize was bad. And that's a good sign, because that means you are getting better. When your best work starts to look bad, that means that you've outgrown it. And you should always be outgrowing your work. You know, you shouldn't be super impressed with everything that you wrote 5 years ago. If you are, that means you haven't gone anywhere for 5 years. And that's not to say you can't do great work that just is always great. But if everything you're writing feels like that, then that's probably a bad sign. So anyway, you do that initial work, you know, before you send it out. You spend months on it, making sure you really think that it's good. And then the way that I started finding places to submit to, whenever I was an intern, we had a literary magazine shelf, and just like the Florida Review would do trades where we would trade issues of our magazines to other magazines. And so I would look through those, and I would read people's bios. That was another big way that I found places to send to. So if you look at any literary magazine in the world, basically, they'll have contributor notes, and the contributors will almost always list other places they published. So let's say Rob gives you a copy of the Raleigh Review. You're reading through it. I write poetry. Let's say you write fiction, and you're reading this. You read a story in it, and you think, "Wow, this story is awesome. This is like, you know, I write similar to this. Like, if it's, you know, this is a first-person story about growing up, like somebody growing up, and it feels like it could have been somewhat autobiographical, but you know, it's clearly fiction, and you know, there's, you know, as somebody loses somebody, I don't know, something like that, and you're like, I write stories that are like this, or like, this is the kind of stories I like to write. You look at that person's bio in the back, you see where else they published, and they'll list like, you know, so and so. William Williamson has also published in Sewanee Review and I don't know, the Baltimore Review and Guernica or whatever, and you look at, and then that now your world kind of branches out into more worlds, and then you go to each of those magazines, you look at their websites, you look at their issues, you see what their work is like, and then you look at their contributors, see where they publish, and you start kind of building this network of places. And for one thing, you shouldn't send to magazines that you've never read. You want to kind of have a sense of what their style is like. And then, and if you feel like your style is a match, and you feel like your work is at a good quality, and if you would feel proud to have it in print, if you would feel proud for others who have never heard of you to read it, then maybe you can think about starting to send those things out. And you'll probably get a lot of rejections at first. And that's fine. I have a running document that logs everything I've submitted since I was 19 years old. I'm 32 now. It's 13 years of publishing history. I think I have probably over 1,000 rejections logged in it. And it's anyway, so and I would recommend keeping that kind of a log, because at some point you probably will get a personal rejection, and they'll say, well, we can't publish this, but we liked your voice, and we hope you'll send us more. And that's a great sign. You send them more. Finding these places to submit by finding writers who write like you do, it's a great place to start. So, you know, you pick up one literary magazine. That's, you know, every journey starts with a step kind of a thing. Like, you find one literary magazine, you start there, and maybe it's nothing like what you write. Maybe you don't like any of the stories in it. or any of the poetry in it. And that's fine. You pick up another one. You find where those people publish. And there's so many opportunities out there that, you know, if you stay in it long enough, it's in a lot of ways a game of perseverance. You know, can you persevere through rejection? Can you find enough opportunities out there? Are you driven enough to submit to more places? Because it gets exhausting after a while. And then the other thing I'll say is not getting caught up in submitting and not getting caught up in publishing, because that's not important. Writing is important. Publishing is secondary. Publishing comes after the writing. So, you know, I got so like on fire for publishing whenever I was a teenager. I was 19, 20 years old, and I got my first publication, and I was like, this is it. I got to publish more. And, you know, I was shotgunning. I was just like sending it everywhere, sending all of my poems everywhere, and, you know, getting a lot of rejections. And then, you know, I honed it after a while, but I went a little crazy at first, but, you know, you don't want to let that distract you. So yeah, that's what I would recommend. Checking out literary magazines, reading people's bios, reading literary magazines, and asking other writers who do submit. You know, if you know other people who are publishing, ask where they submit or where they might recommend, and a lot of times they'll help you.
Thank you so much, Bryce. I don't have any more questions. Well, thank you for all the expertise and all the knowledge you've given us throughout this session. I'm definitely going to utilize it and use it going forward.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Gia. Appreciate the questions and for y'all listening to me kind of babbling up here for 40 minutes.
That was great, Bryce. Thank you so much. That was outstanding. It is just so true that persevering, being creative within your field, and being able to be a jack of all trades also is necessary. Bryce, as you guys may not know, I don't think I've ever mentioned this, but Bryce was my copy editor for my PhD thesis. So he was excellent. He was excellent. So you know, it's just being able to do copy editing, vetting of submissions, as well as reading everything, and also writing. You know, taking care of your own kind of path as a writer, right? And he gave you a lot of good tools. Rejection comes with it. I once my first creative writing class was at the University of Washington with well, actually it was a second. It was a nonfiction course. The professor got up and spent, it was a 3-hour class, met one day a week, and he got up there and he read just quotes on rejection for probably half the class. I mean, they were just like, I wish I could I can't do that, but it was kind of that kind of situation. But you're so right, Bryce, with it being kind of like a being caught up in the publishing world, being kind of, you know, yeah, you know, not appreciating the whole I guess the way it gets competitive and all that is really good advice too. I mean, I think, you know, I've always been told that you compete with yourself, and that's it. And that's what you do. And Bryce gave us a lot of good tips on that, as far as if you like what you wrote 5 years ago as much as you did 5 years ago, then you're probably not growing as a writer. But, you know, but it's not always the case. I mean, but it is the case, you know, especially when you're first starting out, right? So, and showing your writing to people that you trust is very important, and kind of getting that kind of sense. And I'm hoping that Deja, Chris, and Gia, that you guys will begin to do that in the second half of the semester. You'll begin to share your work with each other, and kind of build that community among your peers and things like that. So, but it's a lot of good takeaways there, Bryce, and we really appreciate it, and we appreciate your time and everything else. But yeah, you guys have any more questions of Bryce? So you guys have anything? More questions?
I am good.
Good there? Okay. Gia, you good?
Yes, Dr. Green?
You good, Gia? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, you have any questions?
I just have one more question.
Yes.
Well, not a question, but a statement. I thank you for coming to the class today and sharing your experience and exposure with us. And my question is, how do anonymous writers get published? You know, like when you would see a poem by, like, just say Shakespeare, but then you would see a poem that says anonymous. So I was wondering how does that work? Do you get published with your name, and then when the print goes out, it's just anonymous, or it's a different process to get published as a ghost writer?
I mean, that's a conversation that you have with an editor. So, I mean, isn't the way it will typically work is once you get a poem or a story or essay published or accepted, they send you a contract, which, you know, it's nothing too fancy. Like a Raleigh Reviews contract is like a page it's like 4 paragraphs. And it basically just says, like, you know, you can't republish this for a year, and you agree to, you know, let us put this on the internet or in a magazine, and, you know, we're going to pay you this amount of money for it, or we're going to give you an issue as payment, or we're not going to pay you, as a lot of them would also say, that kind of thing. So it's and you just type your name and date, and that's it. But there's also a lot of times nowadays, whenever people submit, there's actually forms, like these kind of pre-made forms that you fill out as you submit, and a lot of times they'll say your name, and then if you have like a writer's name that you prefer, in which case, if you didn't want to have your name shown at all, or if you wanted to go by a different name altogether that's you consider to be your writing name, you know, you do that at that point. But if you want it to be anonymous, if you wanted to be published under any other name besides your own, then, you know, you talk to the editor before it goes to publication, you know, whenever you're filling out the contract, that kind of thing. And then you let them know, you know, I would rather do this anonymously. And then they just make sure that whenever it goes to print, nobody knows the name of the person, or, you know, nobody knows the given name of the person if they wanted to go by a writing name.
Yeah, my first publication was in a travel magazine. I just used my initials, Rig, that was it. So that's all I used in my first publication. So I was just trying to kind of warm up to the whole thing of kind of having the name out there tied to the occasion and all that. So but yeah, that's good advice. So pseudonym, I guess, that's yeah. So pseudonym, you can use that, and some folks use that. And we covered what happened with the Prairie Schooner kind of incident, as well as the Best American Poetry a few years ago. We covered that with the guy, I think, in the Midwest who submitted under a Chinese name, and of course won the publication Prairie Schooner that was nominated for Best American Poetry, got that. Then they asked for a picture of him. It didn't, but we discussed that in the class already. But yeah, just of course that whole cultural appropriation thing, we're covering some of that too. So, but Bryce, thank you so much. Gia and Chris, if you don't have any more questions, please just if you have any questions, but I'll see you on Monday. And Bryce, if you can hang online for just a minute, I'd like to kind of visit with you for 2 minutes real quick, just to kind of touch base with you. But Chris and Gia, if you don't have any questions, you guys can sign off now. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Chris.
Thanks, y'all.
All right. Thank you, Bryce. Bye-bye.
Yeah, see you, Gia.
Okay, thank you so much for today. I really appreciate the feedback. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks.
See you, Gia. Yeah. So Bryce, let me stop recording right here real quick. So